Hey everyone, welcome to day 4 of the free store hiring challenge. I appreciate you sticking with us for one more day. Today's we're going to go through how we look at a resume, how we tear up a resume, how we look for the hyperbole in the resume. We're going to talk about interviewing styles. We're going to talk about interviewing questions. I'm going to provide you with some structured questions that you can ask a candidate. That it's going to make them think. And what we want to do is figure out, how do these people think about sales, and are they the right fit for our role in our company? So that's where we're going to start. Well, that's where we're going to end. What I want to start with, I had some questions that came through from the live feed last night, and they were questions around um, you know about not selling the role in the company. And they were concerned that that was going to be difficult to do, but more importantly, they thought it was important. And I think it's important to speak about our company in a positive way. I think it's important to be clear about what our expectations are, but I don't think it's appropriate to be selling our company and our role in a phone screen, in an ad, in the first interview or two. I think we really wanted to disqualify, qualify, discern, however we want to look at it, whether this candidate is a good fit. And then we only sell to the folks that are a good fit. And that's I think that's what's really important here for us to look. That's the mindset shift I mentioned on Monday, right? That we're going to stop selling. We're going to stop pitching this company and how great we are, right? We want to really figure out whether these people are a great fit for us. And we're going to treat them like a prospect might treat them during the sales process. So I hope that helps. It is a departure from what most people do, and I don't think we just disregard it, but I don't think we need to sell it. And it's been a very successful way, because it's different, and we're going to treat the folks a little differently. And that's the objective of the STAR process, is to hire differently and get different results. So if you're happy with your results doing it the way you're doing it, then you're fine. But if you want to improve the effectiveness of the hiring, and you want to improve retention, this might be something to contemplate. The other questions that we had were around the assessment that we're using, and are they legal? Are they compliant? Right. So the way I like to answer that question is, they're DEI friendly, right? Our language has been looked at. Last year, it was reviewed by a DEI consultant, and they asked us to change the language of one question. Um, and all we did is soften up the question a little bit. So I think we were pretty on point from a DEI perspective. So we're actually taking biases away from the way we suggest that you hire somebody. That we're looking at, not even looking at resumes, we're not looking at names, we're not looking at anything. We're just like putting them right into this process and go through this assessment and evaluate them on that basis without any really understanding. And I know a lot of folks have trouble like not looking at the resume, but that's really the process that we recommend. And that's, when I'm involved working with a client, that's what we do. um, the other piece is about the being EEOC compliant. If we document STAR, and that's one of the things that we do, then we're able to show anybody along the way that here's how we hire salespeople, and here's how we do it consistently, and here's the documentation for that. So everybody gets treated the same way along the process. So that all of those issues that come up through EEOC is mitigated, because we're showing them like, this is how we do it. And if you can document your process and it isn't a problem, we're not treating some people differently than we are others. That's really what they're concerned about. And it's where you can get into trouble with assessments, when you start to have some people do it and not others. But Ours is at the beginning part of the process. It's always the same. Everybody gets treated that way. That is a EEOC compliant process. Um, so the other question that came about with the how do we access that tool, that questionnaire, that assessment? Um, so there's two ways. I put it into the comment section. There's a subscription model that one can do. The subscription model is sort of a do-it-yourself way. You can go to our link and you can sign up for a monthly subscription, and that allows you to have. It's not unlimited, but it's pretty close to what you're going to need if you're just looking to run this for 2 or 3 months. That allows you access to it. It gives you access to the tool, and you'll be able to manage that all yourself. It doesn't when somebody does that subscription, I'm not involved, but it's a great way to get accustomed to the assessment. The other way we offer that is what I mentioned yesterday, is that we have licenses that are based on the number of hires and the time frame. So the time frame is, if you want to hire one salesperson, we have a 6-month period of time. And then we have a 12-month that we can do from 3 on up, pretty much any number that you want to use if you're going to hire that many people over the course of a year. We sell a lot of 5-person licenses to companies that are constantly recruiting, constantly trying to manage their team and grow their talent. If you're a bigger company, there's licenses out there that people are looking for 400 or 500 salespeople on an annual basis. That's a Fortune 1000 company, and they're trying to fill spots all over the globe. So those are the two models. If you have questions, you can ping me. We'll have a little bit deeper description towards the end of today's presentation. So I just want to make sure I covered all the questions that we had, and I think I did. So let's take the next step here and slide number 2. So I mentioned the challenge mindset on Monday. I mentioned it pretty much every day because it's something that I think we have to be conscious of, that we really want to look at this differently. If you want different results, then we need to think differently. If we want different results, we need to do things differently. And that really starts with, let's not sell the company and the role from the beginning. Let's write a different kind of ad that's going to attract the right sales candidates, the ones that are a good fit on the surface, right? They'll self-select in. So every step of this process is designed to handle this differently than what we've done in the past, because we go back to what we talked about initially, is that salespeople are different. They have different challenges in their role. So they need to have different attributes in their personality and their skill sets, right? We talked about the timing, the rejection, and the hostility, the resistance, the competition that they face on a regular basis, and the lack of control that they have. So, this process is mimicking what they need to do in their sales process to go be effective talking to contacts and prospects and customers. So, different mindset, and to think differently is really issue. And I bring that thread all the way through this process because I think it's something that people struggle with. And there's a consistent theme when I work with clients that's a bit of a challenge for them. The next thing we're going to cover here is the interview framework. There's some ideas that I have about helping you structure that and what's important. And then we're going to get into some interview questions. Excuse me. I'm going to offer you, we're going to look at resumes that we've sort of looked for the hyperbole in them. We look for the BS in them. And then we're going to look at some actual questions you can use and borrow to implement into your interview process. So we're going to cover all of those pieces. So let me switch screens and present this piece over here. There we go. Here we go. So make this a little bigger. So what I have here is some actual resumes that we've, I don't know what the CIA calls it when they black out the words to protect the innocent here, or the guilty in some cases. Um, uh, that's what we've done here to sort of make sure that we don't get anybody in trouble, or get myself in trouble for that matter. So actual resume, and this is exactly what we do when we get to the interview. Prior to the interview, we go through this, and we look at the resume for things that we can want to ask questions about, things that we might want to challenge them about. And we'll get into some of the language in a moment. But you know, when a salesperson uses vague language in their resume, and most resumes have some of that in there, um, salespeople have a lot of it usually. So performance oriented, I've highlighted that because, like, what does that mean? So I'm going to ask: exceptional record of achievement over a 20-year career. Okay, what does that mean? Tenacious manager, strategic. So I've highlighted words that I want to dig into, and I'm not going to hit all of them. Some of it will come as a flow in the conversation, but I want to have all of this there so that I can say, like, I'm just looking at the beginning part of your resume, and I've got a couple of questions because I'm not really sure what these words mean to you, because they mean different things to different people. So I'm not being rude, but I'm setting up, like, I'm looking for some answers to understand how you think about these words. And I'm going to evaluate what they say based on the criteria that we're looking for. Right? Can he be articulate? Can she provide an example of what their of the way they've described this? So again, we're just highlighting some of these words, and sometimes when I do this and I have a face-to-face meeting, I'll have highlighters, I'll have a red pen. It looks like a really bad term paper from high school that's all written up where the teacher had just ripped up your grammar and circled all these things. And it's maybe a little unnerving to the candidate if they see it. When we're doing virtual, they don't really see this. But I'm looking for things that I can understand better and really dig into what they meant. So, manage $9 million territory, exceeding company expectations and sales growth. All right, that's interesting. What does that mean? When you say you exceeded company expectations by a dollar, by 10%, by 50%, what were the expectations, right? So we want to understand, was he just going along a route, making sure that we didn't lose customers? Right? There's not anything wrong with this, but as we start to uncover what they've done, we start to see a pattern, and we start to understand, is this a really good fit, right? So if we have a hunting role and there've been an account manager along the way on a consistent basis, they might not have the chops to be able to go out and hunt for new business. But if you're providing them with lots of leads, and they've been an account manager, can they close business that's been handed to them? Can they open up these new relationships within these accounts? So we're looking for those things depending upon your role. So that's why we start out early, understanding what the role is. And then now we have some criteria to be able to ask these questions to help us figure out what is important on the resume that ties us to this person having success in this role. And you'll see here that there's increased sales by fostering relationships with customers. What the hell does that mean? Right? Like, how did they foster relationships? What did they do? That means a lot of things to different people. So my daughter is a senior this year at university, and she, starting to put her resume together. She's done some internships. So she sent me her resume to say, hey, take a look at this. And, I went through it with a red pen and shared it with her. And I'm like, all of these things here, these are, you highlighted the important things that you accomplished in these roles, right? And high school and in college internships, like, there were things that she did. But what you need to do with the resume is what I instructed her is, like, what did those accomplishments result for the company? What occurred? What outcome was there? So if you come up with a strategic plan for a particular account, the outcome of that strategic plan was what? And that's what we want to articulate and make clear that you did something and what you did exactly. So I grew revenue by 10%. Okay, so a better way of saying that is we grew revenue 10% over our goal of $10 million, which means that we grew revenue $1 million, right? So we really want to be clear about what those outcomes were rather than talk in vague language. And that was my advice to the college student. And you see that people that have had multiple jobs still do the same thing. So when we're looking at a resume, we're looking for those numbers. We're looking for the things that occurred. And went from $2 million to $5 million in 5 months. That's pretty clear. That's pretty good. Like, so my question there would be, how'd you do that? Did you get one big account? Was it 3 accounts? Was it 50 accounts? How did we accomplish that? So you can see that even when they put this here, I'm looking for the understanding behind it, and I'm looking for somebody to be able to articulate what it is that they did. See if we can find manage the $3.5 million territory. Was it 3.5 when you got it? Was it 4.5 when you got it and you managed it down to 3.5, right? We're going to ask these questions in a way that is curious and some skepticism. We're not going to be rude and mean. We're not going to be, kind of punching them in the nose. What we're going to do is like, I need to understand, like, 3.5 million in the territory. Talk to me about, was that a growth number? Was that a target number? Like, and I want them to be able to explain to me what it is they did, and is it going to fit my role? And that's the theme throughout this. And I'm just sharing you. So this document will be available to you in the when we get the replay in the system. So here's some generic questions that tie back to some of the things that we saw in the resume. And I'm not going to run through all of these, but so you grew established, number 8, you grew an established territory by $3 million in 5 months. And how many new accounts was that? Is it $3 million increase, $2 million increase, right? So we're going to dig into this. We want to understand the how, the why, and the what, right? And is this something that they've done before? Was it something that was handed to them? And some simple questions like, you state you're performance oriented. How so? And it's a question that isn't very complicated. It doesn't make the person feel like they're being peppered with questions. So it's just like, how so? How'd you do that? And they need to be able to tell you something that makes you think that they're performance oriented. The more detail they provide, the more examples that they can provide that are germane to your role, because you want them to understand what the role is, because we've told them in the job posting what they need to be good at, and then they should be able to tell their story about these questions in a way that frames it to match up with what they know you're looking for. That's a really, really good candidate, right? That's when you got an A player. It's like, well, in the ad you said you were looking for somebody that could sell value. Well, and then they tell you a story about that as it relates to these questions. So there's a list of these here that you can kind of put into your repertoire of questions that relate to the resumes as you go through them. And I think that we look at a resume in a way to determine questions and concerns about a resume. That's there's lots of theories about asking questions in a certain way. And if we called your former employer, like we ask who did you directly report to? So if we called Stephanie, and Stephanie's we ask her how quickly did Bob ramp up when he started, right? What would she say? Right. So we give them this scenario and it makes them feel like we're going to talk to their old boss, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's a technique that helps you dig in, and anything you can do to dig in a little farther than being superficial on these ideas, the better. So I think that's is really looking at a resume with some skepticism, looking at it, being empathetic. We want to look at dates, Did they jump around a lot? Was there something going on in the economy? Can they tell us a story? Are they making excuses about bosses and things like that? It's more common, even in the last 10 years, it's more common to see people moving around, right? With COVID um, and just in general with this sort of gig economy. So I look at people that have changed jobs, 2 or 3 times in a 3 to 5 year period. I'm kind of concerned. So I'm going to ask some questions about that, and don't hesitate to ask the question and to see if they can give you a valid reason. There are lots of times when there's valid reasons. I had on my resume, I work for a company that the CEO went to jail for embezzling money um, from his company and another company and some tax issues. Long story, but the company folded up, um, and it's a terrible story. But I had to help explain that without making it sound like he was an evil guy, which he was. But I had to help tell that story after that, and it's a bit of a challenge to be able to walk that line of not sharing too much, not sharing where you're making excuses. So don't hesitate to question, the job jumping around business here. Let me see if I can. Yes. So interviews. I think there's no hard and fast rule about how many resumes or excuse me, how many interviews we should conduct. I think that is a structure that's based on the company, the complexity of the role. I like to have more than one person engage with the um, interview the candidate, especially if they're going to interface with multiple departments. And if I have a leader in a department that I can rely on, I can trust that I can get them to ask some questions that I specifically want answers to, I will bring them into interviews. So the rule of thumb is we want to move a candidate through our process from the time we ask them to take that assessment to the time we make an offer. We want that time frame to be 2 or 3 weeks. If we go much past that, we risk candidates losing interest. We lose the chance for somebody else to come along and take that person and make an offer. So that 2 to 3 week is reasonable. If we have a higher level position in an organization where there's a sales leader, it might take a little bit longer. But if we're talking about a sales role where they're a hunter, salesperson, they're a account manager, that 2 to 3 week window is a good rule of thumb. And there might be exceptions because we're scheduling conflicts and things. But if we're interviewing and we're in this process, the people that are going to be part of the hiring process must have some time built into their calendar to accommodate. And if we offer a time slot to somebody and they're not available that time, then if that gets extended, we've tried to move it along. And so I think that's the 2 to 3 week thing is clear. We should tell them up front what the steps are. We should try to not make them come back and forth multiple times. So if we want them to speak to a service department leader and we want them to speak to an estimating department leader, and maybe there's an engineering group or something that they need to speak with, then we bring them in and we try to stagger those conversations where all three of those folks are together and there's a coordination to that interview where they take turns and they watch each other and they share their notes when we're done, or they're blocked up right back to back to each other. Like somebody sits in the conference room, candidate comes in, and then in 15 or 20 minutes, those people change out and they have the conversation. We want that person to have some space. We want them to be comfortable. We want them to not feel like they're asked to come back and forth to the office 4 or 5 times just to speak to one person for 20 minutes. So we want to structure these in a way that is meaningful for us to gather data, but also meaningful that the candidate time is respected. Again, professional and polite. We like to do this in clusters. I have some clients who make their phone screens. They block off a couple hours over here, and then the next week they've got some time blocked off for candidates that come out of the phone screens to do some interviews. And again, the interviews we could do a 30-minute interview where we just look at the resume. We could do a 45-minute interview where we're just looking at the resume. And then we could go a little bit deeper in a longer formatted email. Again, your choice. I like the phone screen. Then if I'm going to have multiple people involved, then I like to do a interview in the front where I'm going to spend about 45 minutes with somebody, and I'm going to cover some resume questions that I want, and then I'm going to have some other people ask resume questions that I'm not going to ask. I want some coordination there, right? I've already asked these questions. You guys are going to focus on this, and then you can ask other questions, right? So there's coordination, I think, that's important. Another way of doing it is to schedule a 90-minute meeting. I have an interview tomorrow with a candidate for a client where we have 90 minutes scheduled. It's all virtual, and I'm going to spend, a third of that talking about the resume. I'm going to spend a third of that talking about questions and concerns around the assessment. Right? I'm going to poke around in there with what those findings were and see, how they react to some of the strengths and weaknesses. And then I'm going to spend a third of the time talking about the expectations of the role. I'm going to talk about what the company expectations are. I'm going to talk about some of the messaging challenges. I'm going to tell them some of the things that we don't do really well, that they're going to need to be able to step in and fill some gaps, right? I want to give them the good and the bad. I don't want to tell them a terrible story, but I want to tell them there's some challenges here. It's going to be difficult to reach these people. You're going to have to be very diligent to reach these types of prospects. Or we're, just the opposite, right? There's not going to be a problem giving you leads. You're going to have a great opportunities coming to you. Your challenge is going to be closing them because of the competition that's out there, because we're more expensive. So you're going to really have to focus on our value prop, right? So whatever that is, I want to make sure that they get that in the last third. And I get a question a lot about how much do we talk about compensation? And I usually say at the beginning of the first interview, I'm not going to talk about compensation other than what we had in the ad. And we're going to cover that if we get that to the end. So if those numbers weren't something that fits, then let's have that, let's talk about that right now. If you're looking to earn 250 and our job on target earnings is 150, then we have a problem. So let's not waste each other's time. But I don't like to talk about compensation until the end, until we get a candidate that's real. And often we have the final decision maker, or we have the CEO, that if they're going to be involved, we have them help define that comp plan. And it's all broken out, real simple, straightforward for them to explain it. So I think those are the things that we really need to think about, is so how your structure is going to work, what's going to work for you. And being tight with those and staying on point, trying to get it all done. So there's another document here I have up on the screen. Let me make this a little bit larger. There's some scripts here that I think are important to set the stage and grab control of it, of the interview. And this language you can play with and nuance for yourself. It needs to be authentic, but you want to appreciate their time. Thanks for meeting with us today. I want to apologize in advance. We have a lot to cover in the time frame that we have today, so there's a lot I want to learn about you, and as a result, some of the questions might come about a little quick, might be a little fast. I might even interrupt you, right? So we want to set the stage for what's going to happen, and that should help them understand that they need to be concise, and clear about their answers, and they shouldn't be rambling, right? And if you cut them off a couple of times and they keep doing that, what that tells you something about their ability to read the room and understand what's really going on in context. So I mean, I usually say, please don't take it personally, and I get their affirmation on that. So I like to start with one or two big questions before I dive into the resume. And there's a few of them here. I've highlighted a couple of them that I like to use. The second one, walk me through a sales conversation. What you're looking for there is a process they have. If you think you got an A player, they should be able to walk you through that. I can walk somebody through my sales process, stage by milestone, stage by milestone by milestone. But it's a tough question. So if you're really looking to challenge somebody, it's a great question to ask. But just the one that's like, why do people buy from you? It really is illuminating about how they think about their relationship with a prospect. It helps you understand, their need to be liked and their ability to, to navigate a conversation. And if you sit back and just let them answer and go, you're going to learn a lot about how they think about relationships, about business relationships. And it sort of opens up the conversation for you to go big picture and then dive down a little bit and get into some of the nitty gritty. And I love this question. So think about a significant opportunity that you won in the last few months, and walk me through the major steps you took to close the business. And please start with how you got the opportunity. And this does a lot. It's a great question to ask, either at the beginning, in the middle, or the end, because it's going to help you understand their ability to sell value. It's going to help you understand if they are out there hustling, if they got this business themselves, if it was handed to them, if it was a big account. You're going to understand what they think is significant, right? So if they're like, yeah, I had a really big deal that we closed 3 months ago, and all right, great. Tell me about the size of the deal. And if they come back to you and it's a $10,000 project, and your average sale in the role that this person needs to fill is $50,000, right? What does that start to tell you? You can start to dig in a little bit further and ask some more questions about their idea of significant, their idea of a lot of money. And you can tell them, in the third part of this interview, is like, hey, our deals, we average around 50 grand per opportunity that we close. Is that going to be a problem for you? Well, no, of course not. Well, you told me before you had a significant opportunity at 10, and you told me that your average deal size was about $3,500. So I'm concerned. And then just stop and let them talk, listen to what they say, watch their body language. That's what's great about having some of these questions written down, because you can ask the question and then just kind of sit back and observe, take notes, right? And be clear about what you're seeing, and try to be objective. So there's, when we get the assessment, if you looked at it last night, there's a lot of pages to it, a lot of information. It can be overwhelming, but there's a section in there that actually helps you ask questions. We recommend questions that you ask to go dig into weaknesses and to verify strengths. We want to make sure that we understand that what they actually said is what they actually do. And we have a confidence score as well, because we can track if they answered the same types of questions, because we'll ask the same type of question 4 times. They don't necessarily realize that, but if they give us different answers in those 4 types of questions, that throws up a red flag, which is a cool little feature. So I always, show some appreciation for them taking the assessment, because they've spent some time going through this, and there's the really good candidates are curious about the results, like how'd they do, and so you get that question a lot if you're using the system. And my response to how did I do is usually, well, you're here now, so you must have did pretty well, right? I don't give them a number. I don't get into the answers, right? Because that's not what we're trying to do. You got this far, you made it this far, you did well enough to get to this point. And then, if they push a little harder, it's like, we go over the results and the findings with the candidates we hire, because it's an important part of how we coach our salespeople. And then I cut them off at that point. So, there's some compatibility questions here. There's a couple of questions that we ask about that help us understand if they did well. Talk to me about your sales training. Talk to me about how you've conducted your career, right? And the people that do pretty well have had some level of training in the past that's stuck with them, or they're eager to learn, and they're constantly reading, and they may have a mentor or a coach. So it helps us understand how they think when we dig into this a little bit. And there's an interesting question that we can ask, in terms of their example. There's 3 findings right there: hunter, consultative, and closer. Those are 3 findings that are on the assessment. And if I told you that, if I ask you to rank your skill set as which one was the highest, which one was in the middle, and which one was the lowest score, where would you rank yourself on those 3? And then they sort of give you I'm a great hunter, so I'm going to say hunting was number 1, and I'm a closer, so I'm great closer, and I'm a consultative seller, right? So they rank it themselves in that order. And then you can say, would you be surprised if the findings of the assessment was the complete opposite of that, or something different? And then you get to see what happens when their self-assessment isn't acknowledged, isn't validated. And I think it's an interesting a way of looking into somebody's mind about how they react. And sometimes it's negative. I would say your findings are wrong, right? Which is sort of sort of in your face and gives you some feedback. And somebody's like, well, that'd be interesting, because I'd be interested as to why that is and learn more about it, right? That maybe that means they're coachable. So I think that's there's some questions that we can ask. There's lots of questions within the assessment report that you can use. So this is a great setup, and I would encourage you to kind of steal this. So when you switch to that 3rd component where we're talking about the role and the expectations, and you can almost use this verbatim, right? Let me tell you about our company. We're looking for a needle in the haystack. You must understand business and enough experience to learn it quickly, and you really hit a high level of all the things that we've had in the ad. And but you're telling them you're looking for that needle in the haystack, and this is going to be difficult. And that really sets up, I believe it really sets up the candidate to understand that you're clear about what it is you're looking for, and that person, we're not sure if he or she is the right candidate. So it's going to keep them on their toes, and that's what we want to see them perform at the highest level, because they should be able to perform at a high level because they're selling something that they know pretty well themselves. So, and then you go through and talk about the expectations and the role and things. And then, this gives you some structure to how to end the interview. You can't use this each time you go through an interview, but you can use variations of this. Okay, so here's what happens next. And then you tell them what the next steps would be if they move on. And then what we're looking for is to stop talking and see what they do. We want them to engage. We want them to try to get more information. We want them to see, to do something. And there's a couple of examples there for us to to evaluate their answers. Like, somebody's like, okay, thank you, to be like, hey, great, I appreciate your time. Can you give me some idea how, how I did, or if I might move to the next step? So what do you do when they ask that? If you think they're going to move to the next step, you can tell them, I think I heard a lot of things that I was looking to hear. I think you did well. I have got two more candidates to talk to, but I like what I heard. I don't make a commitment. I don't make promises, but I give them, sort of the thumbs up, so that if they're looking at some other opportunities, they don't get discouraged. And then they might share something at that point. I have told people, like, I'm definitely moving you forward. You ticked off a lot of the boxes, so the next step is X, right? It really depends on the number of candidates you have, how much where you are in the process, and when they ask that question. So I hope that helps, gives you some um, some strategy around asking questions and being, the format of the interview. I'm going to share with you one more document that you will get in the workspace. Here we go. So these are more questions that you can ask. It can have them at the ready. So I like to have like a series of these questions on a sheet of paper, and then I circle the ones that I want to ask the particular candidate that I'm talking to, because some of these there's overlap. Some of them we're trying to learn other things, and sometimes I give these questions to other people that are going to be part of the process, so that they can ask the question that I want to get asked that maybe I didn't ask. So they're broken up into a couple of sections here: the resume questions and the responses, right? So would your current employer say you got off to a quick start? Right? It's a generic question, but it really helps you understand. It takes them back to where they're currently working, or their most recent employer, and we're trying to get them to see how they describe what a quick start is, and you can dig into this. This opens up that conversation. So you want to hear how and why, excuse me, with some detail about why they got off to a quick start. And a great answer is telling you, you know what, they probably would tell you I didn't, because I didn't have a really good understanding of the market. It took me a couple of months to really learn about the marketplace that I was calling on, and I didn't do a good job, or whatever, right? They could screw that up and say, blame the company for not getting them up to speed quickly. That tells you a little bit about their level of responsibility. So there's a list of questions here that I think um, are worth considering at different times during the stage. As I said, I like to give these to other people so that they can have a question that really they get to see how somebody thinks about sales. And they're going to ask the technical questions, or questions that they care about. But I wanted them to, I say, I want you to ask these two questions, and I want you to capture their answers and tell me what you thought about that. And then you can ask whatever questions you want. And that's sort of like my kind of rule. I want somebody else asking sales questions, and to see what they think. Again, we have a significant opportunity type question here. Your sales manager. Those are great questions to really understand. Have they had good sales managers in the past? Did they get coaching? Were they in a system that's similar to yours? You can start to understand if you have a situation where you have a sales manager that really supports the salespeople, and this candidate has never had that. That might be something we need to poke around a little bit and make sure that they understand that you're going to support the salespeople differently than what they're used to. And sometimes people think that's, you're up in my business, you're micromanaging, when you're really doing a good job of managing and coaching somebody. So some other resume questions that are here. You state you're motivated. How so? Right? These are similar to the other ones. The last one I think is is important when you have a role where you expect them to go out and look for business. Your prepared presentations and facilitated RFP responses. What did you do that was proactive, right? And asking that question and then stop talking and listening really will help you see if they stammer around, if they struggle to find an answer. Maybe they didn't do any hunting. They were just, filling out orders that came through. And if you have a role that requires them to be proactively engaged with with your prospects, this is likely to be a problem. So there's some self-improvement questions that I think are important to ask a salesperson. We can ask about what sales training they've had. But the top performers, they're going to have read books. They're going to have gotten coaching outside of their own company. They're going to have done some things that are where they've spent their own time and money to get better, and they should be able to talk about that. And so if you ask them like about a book that they've read that was sales development or personal development, and they give you a name, it's like, oh, okay, tell me about what you thought about that or what your takeaway was. Even if you haven't read the book, are they stammering around? Are they giving you like generic stuff that wasn't really, like, they didn't read the book? Or well, I read it like 5 years ago, and like, oh, so it hasn't really stuck with you. You didn't apply it. And that tells you something, like they haven't read a book in 5 years. So the middle question here in the self-improvement is one that I recommend. Think about the time you realized you're missing some skills and knowledge in sales, and what was missing and what'd you do about it, right? It's really open-ended, and then they have to really tell you a good story. It tells you how they think. It's one of those questions that I like to ask on a regular basis. So I've got some, on some blog posts here that are listed that will help you with some aspects of the hiring process. This one about the myth of having industry experience is something that I recommend take 5 minutes reading through it, because it's not necessarily having experience doing exactly what you do. It's a correlation to them having called on the same type of decision maker. And that's really what we're looking for there, not the exact same experience. On my website, there's a hiring mistake calculator. You answer some questions, and if you answer them honestly, it'll tell you exactly what your cost structure is for when you lose a salesperson. And it's not just the generic 3 to 5 times. It gets you a good number. I would recommend that you're sitting down when you look through it, because often it is a big number. So let me stop sharing this screen, go back to my slides. So we covered the first interview. And I, just to do a quick review, it's really important that we're focused on a structure. We tell them the structure. We're clear about what it is that we're looking for. Everybody's part of this. Everybody that's part of the hiring process is clued in on what we're doing, right? They don't necessarily have to be a star expert, but we want to have their role and what they're doing in the interview clear. I've sat in on interviews with some folks that just kind of went down a path that was like, I'm bored because I'm trying to understand the salesperson, and you're just boring everybody in a room. So, we want to make sure they have a plan. We want to make sure they have a role, especially if you're doing, 2 or 3 people in the room at the same time. I recommend not putting more than 3 people with a candidate. It's a little overwhelming, unless they're going to have to deal one on many. It's might not be fair given the world. So what I want to do here is introduce something to you. When we're done tomorrow, you're going to have all of the tools. You're going to have all of the information. You're going to have the scripts. You're going to have the mindset piece. You're going to know how to configure your role. You're going to have your interviewing system down. You have the questions that you want to ask the candidate in an interview. Tomorrow we're going to talk about onboarding. There's a series of checklists that I have. It's difficult to give somebody an onboarding plan that because they're unique, but there's some common areas that we want you to think about as you're contemplating onboarding a new candidate. So we're going to cover that tomorrow. But what I wanted to share here is you have all the tools, and a lot of you are going to be like, I get this. This isn't hard. We've interviewed people along. You're just asking us to change up our mindset, and I can go do this. And that's great. That's the purpose of this, is to help as many people possible to get through it. And then there might be some of you out there that are comfortable with this. I get it. I understand it. But I'm not sure I can go teach it to my team that has to go execute this, because I'm not going to go execute it. So I have an offer here that might help those folks. There might be some people that, like, I'm not really sure I get it, and I definitely need to help my team. So there's some things that we can talk about as to what that looks like to help you. But I've had clients that, like, I get it, but I'm not really sure that I can execute on all the details. So what I like to do in those situations is to walk down that path with a client, and do it together, and actually go through the entire hiring process to hire one candidate. And it's it's really illuminating, because we get examples. They get to see exactly how we go through it. They see the nuance. They can ask questions. We can debrief. They can try it. We can debrief. So it's sort of a fun way of executing on something and learning it, because my goal is to have somebody be able to go do this themselves without our support. We have some clients that have us help them do the recruiting throughout the whole process, or pieces of it. But they all use the assessment tool. So I have this sales hiring academy that we put together, and there's lots of tools that are involved, that everything you see here and some other things. But it's here to help your team make this work for them. So really hard to see. So let me walk through this real quick. What I've done here is broken down the steps of what it is that we do, and I put a value on those if I kind of a la carte at those. So we do that work at the front end to help a client prepare the team. We help coach them up on it. I have a training program that they can go through to learn this, and it documents the process, and they put it in a notebook, and it's all there. We design the selling profile to fit exactly what it is you're looking for. We craft a job posting with them. We give them all the email templates and scripts, and sometimes they use those in Outlook. Sometimes they put them in their ATS, and then we work with them on the license. There's some nuance to the license that we didn't get into, but there's ability to analyze candidates that didn't fit role A, but you have role B. And did some of these people fit this job? So we can take and switch those configurations without having the candidates do anything, and determine whether or not they might be a fit for this role, because it's a little easier, right? So we can do that. We can help show that. We can go through and populate the data in a variety of different ways and analyze it. So we teach a client how to do that. We do a license for one hire, which is one hire within 6 months, whatever happens first, right? So if we don't hire somebody in 6 months, that license expires and you have to do something else. But it's unlimited. You're going to assess everybody along the way. You don't assess your current employees. It's a different tool. But everybody that comes across with a resume, boom, right? And it's really helpful when somebody comes along. I have a client who the CFO said, hey, I know this guy, you'd be perfect for the job. Great. Have them send the resume in. Well, I think you should just interview them. Have them send the resume in, please. This is our process. We're sticking to our process, right? It's just how we do it. And everybody's going to be treated the same. And, there's a little pushback at first, but then they realize we got a process and we need to follow it, and everybody should be treated the same. So we help you understand the platform and use that effectively. And then we actually help deliver the phone screens. We help deliver the interviews. We help put that all together with the recordings. And so maybe there's a senior sales leader or CEO at the end that needs to do the final interview. We give them everything that they need, get them answer their questions. We show them all the resumes that have been done, the assessment that's there, and then they can go interview that candidate with confidence that the 2 or 3 candidates that they're put in front of them are somebody that is worth their time. So I value that whole spiel. A little over 28 grand, and the offer that I'm making for folks in the challenge is to do all of those things that I just described. Help somebody do one hire for just under $7,000. It's only for the people that are part of the challenge. And if you're interested in that, you'll get an email tomorrow, maybe on Monday, that says, here's the application process. This isn't done for anybody that just wants to do it. We have some questions that we go through with a company, with a potential client, to really make sure that they're committed to doing the things that we want to do. This is a lot of work for us, and we want it to be successful for the company. So I don't want to do this with somebody who's really not committed and won't follow through and do all of the steps. So I need to figure that part out. So we ask a few questions, and then we can move forward. So we'll talk about this a little bit more tomorrow. That's the tomorrow's onboarding, and I'm looking forward to working with you one more day on this process. So thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.